Hello, and welcome to this recording of an updated version of my presentation, given at the Spectres of Justice, the Aesthetics of Dealing with Violent Pasts conference, which took place at the University of Marburg, Germany, from the 28th to the 30th of May 2015. I was grateful to have received €400 from the university to attend. They put speakers up in beautiful accommodation. Marburg is a wonderful university town, about an hour's train journey from Frankfurt. I had a thoroughly pleasant stay there and would highly recommend a visit. My paper concerns ways that video installations by Derry-born artist Willie Doherty confront difficult memory, silencing and shame around those who were disappeared during the Northern Ireland conflict. On the 4th of November 2013, BBC One Northern Ireland and RTE One in the Republic of Ireland broadcast a documentary on the disappeared. This is a term that, in this context, refers to 17 individuals known to have been abducted, killed and secretly buried in the 1970s and 1980s. Most were claimed by the Provisional Irish Republican Army. The programme was produced by an independent company. It was presented by reporter Dara McIntyre and directed by Alison Miller. It involves interviews and testimonies from politicians and the victims' families, some of whom were speaking publicly for the first time. It took 4 decades for this sensitive topic to be given any real airtime on mainstream regional television. Notably, the documentary was not broadcast nationally across the rest of the UK. But the break in silence comes after many years of the issue emerging in an increasing range of visual and sonic arts practices, which themselves are often marginal to popular or more widely accessible platforms. In being relatively marginal or alternative, video installation, for instance, can experience less resistance to giving voice to difficult memories and has the potential to transform galleries into interstitial spaces, which can be sensitive to viewers' capabilities of bearing witness to traumatic memories and experiences. Steps towards this perhaps include the more internal and solitary art forms, both for the creator and the viewer, of poetry, painting and photography. The television documentary is bookended by a reading on the soundtrack of excerpts from Seamus Heaney's Bog poems about the preserved remains of people who'd been sacrificed or executed centuries before, and their bodies dumped in bog marshes. With these two remain the stigma of presumed criminal activity. As the Northern Ireland conflict escalated in the early 1970s, Republican paramilitary such as the IRA took to disappearing individuals. The most likely reason for this was that they suspected these people of being informers. However, some instances may have been cases of mistaken identity or were used to instill fear in the wider community. Whatever the purpose, the stigma of informing was usually attached to the disappeared person and their family. Out of 17 bodies, 3 remain missing. The found have been discovered in the liminal spaces and landscapes of beaches, boglands, forests and fields, largely in areas either side of the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, that is, the geopolitical frontier between the UK and Ireland, which also splits the province of Ulster. Most discoveries and retrievals have happened since 1999, when the IRA admitted to killing and burying some of these people. The most recent was the discovery and recovery of Seamus Ruddy's remains on the outskirts of Paris, France, in May 2017. Given the rumours about informing, the families have been met with denial and shame within their own communities. It was only with the paramilitary ceasefires in 1994 and the emergence of organisations such as We Have Trauma Centre that the families could begin to confront what had happened and safely appeal for answers. In the period since the signing of the 1998 peace agreement, Willie Doherty is one of quite a few artists whose work reiterates notions of dumped bodies and traces of violence left in liminal territories. Doherty was born in Derry City, County Londonderry, in 1959 and is an artist mostly working in photography and video installation. As a 12-year-old, he witnessed events there during Bloody Sunday, when 13 people were shot dead and many others injured by British Army gunfire during a civil rights march on the 30th of January 1972. This early trauma has stayed with him and pervades much of his work, which also often explores shifts in media coverage and problems with mediatised memory and experience around such events. He is also drawn to Hollywood horror and thriller genres, and the shared cinematic experience of being in a desensitised room. This is reflected in his exhibition techniques. His moving image work is always screened in a blackened, muted space, only lit by the screen, and the viewer must embody the performative act of blindly turning at least one uncertain corner in the dark before entering the space. He consistently plays with vision and enforced lack of vision, with what is seen and what we are prevented from seeing. Examples of common themes emerging in his work include surveillance, spectrality, ghostliness, absent presence, that is, what is there but not really there, ambivalence, hypermasculinity, and mediatisation. Above those themes, he describes himself as primarily a landscapist. His film and photography work always intersects with land and cityscapes. Place and space are integral, as shown in examples of his work, situated in spaces peripheral to the urban, which are also not necessarily rural. They are spaces of betweenness. As indicated by the title, Sometimes I Imagine It's My Turn touches on the paranoid anxiety induced by overexposure to news media reportage of horrific crimes. An abstract and slowly emerging narrative arc can be identified across Doherty's work, engaging with the notion of dumped bodies, including the sense of searching in No Smoke Without Fire in 1994. The low camera height and angles positioned as if from the point of view of bodies dumped on roadsides in Tell Me What You Want, produced in 1996. And then the camera repeatedly happening upon a body in a woodland clearing in Sometimes I Imagine It's My Turn in 1998, as Northern Ireland moves firmly into the peace process. This kind of image provides a stark reminder of the lingering presence of unfinished, unacknowledged, undealt with business as life and politics hurtle towards an uncertain future. Looking back at this notion from 2017, a year in which Northern Ireland's devolved Assembly has not sat due to ongoing feuds between the Democratic Unionist Party and Sinn Féin, who must agree to share power or face direct rule from Westminster. These images and ideas about the spectres of the violent past are even more pertinent 20 years on. The filming in Sometimes I Imagine It's My Turn alternates between smoother dolly and steadicam shots filmed on 35mm and handheld wobbly and grainy footage filmed on video. The roving camera repeatedly encounters the body of a man lying face down on the woodland floor, the camera always tilted down to the ground from varying proximities, moving from right to left and stopping when the body's feet and legs enter the frame at various angles. The apparently male body is found many times, but the camera passes him with clinical indifference, as Jean Fisher puts it, before the image crossfades into a retake of the shot or a cutaway to a distorted televisual image. Helicopter rotors interject on the audio at times, a sound evoking searching and deterrence. Significantly, the man's head is never reached. He is devoid of identity. On one hand, he could embody the disappeared, while on the other he perhaps represents the faceless mass of the conflict's collateral damage. Such readings intersect with the paranoid state of fear in the province of Ulster when dealing with dumped bodies raises questions about what they've done to receive punishment, and the realisation that it could be anyone next because there are so many cases of mistaken identity or random acts of violence. The tactility of the physical body is troubled by the shifting camera, the graininess and cutaways to CCTV footage and rendered shots of news broadcast footage of missing person stories. While the inserts shift the focus to what cannot be seen and to what is distorted, to that which is without clarity, the approaching camera repeatedly finding the present body implies that an insidious presence remains and passively views. The implications of absence are explored in Doherty's later work Buried, made firmly in the post-conflict peacetime period in 2009, which was made to complement Ghost Story from 2007, which is perhaps his best-known moving image piece. Together, they confront the psychic legacies of unresolved traumatic memory. In Buried, a high-definition camera scans a woodland with forensic detail in slow wide pans and lengthy close-ups. The images detail leafy trees and a clearing strewn with discarded signifiers of a recent human interaction with and on the site, including crackling fire embers and shards of melted plastic. These traces can, perhaps too easily, be read as markers of a violent past in this place. Distant helicopter rotors are heard again, and are joined by further distant voices and dog barks heard off-screen. The sound creates a tension between what is within and beyond the ambiguous scene, between the still silence of the abandoned clearing and the busy movement heard in the distance. Given the sounds of the helicopter and dogs, it is easy to assume that the voices belong to a search party of some description, but nothing is ever certain or as it appears on the surface in Doherty's work. He makes careful use of these different audiovisual elements of film language to play on the viewer's internalised understanding of what is implied in this combination, and suggests something insidious has occurred to disrupt the idyllic Irish landscape. Buried provides an example, as does Sometimes I Imagine It's My Turn, of his alternative approach to artistic engagements with the Irish landscape, of which Ancient Ground is another. The 2011 work crossed the border with the Republic of Ireland to do just this, and the result is a film whose detailed images and poetic narration provide a clear evocation of issues surrounding the disappeared. Filmed in the County Donegal peat bogs, Ancient Ground begins with wide establishing shots of a rural pathway flanked by dank, grassy earth. A voice-over narration alludes to walking along and surveying such paths in search of something. This monologue is spoken by an ageing woman in a soft, breathy tone tinged with sadness. She begins, "I walk these roads every day, the ancient ground, looking for a sign, some disturbance, something shifted, revealed." The wider shots then cut to increasingly closer framing of the land. Aided by intensive lighting, individual blades of grass, flecks of grit, and insects on the surfaces of pooled muddy water are captured with stark clarity, while the language implies hopefulness that the often tread ground will finally reveal the object of this woman's search, but also articulates the shame imposed on someone like her from the implications of this kind of loss. The visual language is as loaded as the spoken words. The camera lingers on the ground, particularly on layers of earth. This invitation to stare at, and perhaps into, the earth is in such sustained detail, suggests there is something there to be seen beyond the capabilities of even a high-definition camera's probing gaze. This is not a passive camera, it encourages active engagement. Doherty has stated that unresolved problems, such as the disappeared, are difficult to substantiate through visualizing. while society remains keen to profess that the war is over, it's time to move on and forget about the past. Doherty is conscious of documenting in detail what is already there, what is present, and as such his work represents rather than represents. Independent of the voiceover, these images could easily be mistaken for those from a more traditional agricultural or rural-based magazine show, but the narration gives them a clear association with the disappeared. Just as these peat bogs exist between solid earth and marsh, the families of the disappeared are trapped between pastness and presentness, life and death, knowing and unknowing. Ancient ground intervenes on official memories and histories by acknowledging and calling to mind the spectral presences of past unresolved traumas in a so-called peaceful society that is in fact still turbulent and fractured. The film reflects the fact that insidious truths lie preserved and dormant beneath the surface. Almost in reply to the earlier "Sometimes I imagine it's my turn," made on the cusp of the peace agreement, Buried and Ancient Ground utilise advanced technologies in mechanised vision and image capturing to scrutinise traces of past human presences and activities on and in the landscape. Looking back through Doherty's body of work, the cold and uninterested cameras passing the body in Sometimes I Imagine It's My Turn can be viewed as mirroring the actions of the peace process. For peace to remain, we must turn a blind eye and perpetually move forward with blinkered onward vision. And yet the movement is backward. The camera consistently moves from right to left against the flow of reading in the West. It is also continually reset to starting position, a move further reinforced by the looped method of screening video installations, and the same mistake or act of negation is repeated over and over. Although the camera is moving forward, it never gets anywhere due to this resetting. Over a decade post-agreement, Buried and Ancient Ground are underpinned with a sense that the most visible problems from the past may have been cleared away, but psychic memories are still triggered by discernible traces. Scars indicate wounds and do not equate to emotional healing. The dead's voices emerge through their loved ones who continue to seek answers. The stipulations of the peace agreement and the state-organised forgetting it facilitates have endowed Northern Ireland's post-conflict society with a troubled peace process that requires slow and careful procedures to address conflict transformation and acquire a semblance of social justice. This is further complicated when the families of the disappeared represent so many others who have never and may never get the answers they've sought for decades. Willie Doherty is only one artist whose work potentially opens platforms for acknowledging and discussing repressed issues. On this topic alone, his videos and photographic series are part of an intertextual and ekphrastic network of cultural products confronting this sensitive issue, which is in no way exclusive to Northern Ireland. A concern in the region is the major cuts to arts funding in recent years. Since the 1990s, arts and grassroots organisations have provided space in which testimonies can be told, shared and heard without judgment, and have helped people to connect and heal. The arts are usually the first to suffer when cuts are said to be needed in times of austerity. The stifling of voices which results from this contributes to official forgetting and ensures that the past stays in the past. Just as momentum picks up, the narrative is reset and the loop begins again in real life. The persistence of the arts in Northern Ireland keep the disappeared and other marginalised issues in public view. Funding or not, the arts community working with the people of Northern Ireland continues to find means to communicate when silenced. If you would like to read my more in-depth analysis of the ways that artists and filmmakers confront issues stemming from the Northern Ireland conflict, please see my book, Old Borders, New Technologies, Reframing Film and Visual Culture in Contemporary Northern Ireland, and my chapter in the edited collection Post-Conflict Performance, Film and Visual Arts, Cities of Memory. I have also published on works concerning the disappeared in Northern Ireland and Chile in the edited collection Peripheral Visions in the Globalising Present, Space, Mobility, Aesthetics. You can access more of my research via my YouTube channel and my blog at pblair.blogspot.co.uk. I am at pblair on Twitter. Thank you so much for viewing.